Well, we're not dead yet. That's what I could say. I was very naive about climate change until I got sucked into this UCL Lancet Commission about 4 or 5 years ago. And I met Hugh, actually, at that stage. I didn't really know Hugh then. And at first I thought Hugh's a bit of a scaremonger. You know, I thought a bit of a catastrophist. But actually, you don't need to spend too long looking at all the data to actually begin to get actually quite depressed about it and quite gloomy. But I think there are still a lot of things that can be done. So I don't think we should be completely saying no more children, that kind of thing. But certainly we've got a massive problem, as Hugh's talked about, and we've also got a population pressure issue, which is not just about climate. We know that, you know, the whole HIV pandemic was about increasing proximity between human and animal populations, and we're seeing that in all kinds of ways. And we're certainly in a new era now, I think, of ecological public health. I think that's the great challenge of the next few decades, and I think there'll be a lot of research opportunities actually in this. The thing about this is it's different from pandemics, it's different from sort of major health crises that we're comfortable with. This is a slide from Chris Rapley, and it basically shows that it affects everything that we understand, from the earth to our air, to the water, to ice, to living beings, everything. And that's the scary thing. We've got this slide about how much the emissions are going up. I've got the, this is Jim Hanson's slide. Because they measure the heat now of the oceans using these Argo floats, and they've been doing it for about 10 years, and it's more accurate about the heat transfer into the planet. And I didn't know what 0.6 was, and I see you picked up on the Hiroshima bombs, and it's 400,000 bombs a day, which seems like a lot of energy going into our oceans and rest. The thing that worried me most were the tipping points. You see, everyone's doing these linear projections into the future, and the one thing that I picked up from reading, particularly the historical data on climate, if you look at Jim Hansen, is that climate isn't like that smooth. It does this, and it does it very rapidly. You can get big shifts in climate over relatively short time frames, even as few as, you know, a couple of decades, and that's happened historically all the time. We know all about the tipping points. The first is that ice sheet disintegration is happening much faster than the computer models were projecting even 5 to 10 years ago. The second is this slight complex slide, which measures the ecological footprint of our planet, this being the sort of safe level, against the Human Development Index. So these are very poor countries that have got a long way to develop up to here, and these are the wealthy countries. This is America, which has gone from there to there, so it's still accelerating away from its ecological footprint. And there's only one country that actually fits in the ecologically sound and human development. Anyone? Cuba. I saw you mouthing Cuba. Yeah, it's Cuba actually. But you can sort of see that we're in a bit of a mess, and there's lots of biodiversity slides which show you how everything's being threatened by this. I'm not actually such a gloom merchant about population as some people. I spoke to the top demographer in China, and population in China at the moment is 1.2 billion. What will it be in the year 2100? Any offers? Ian? Have a guess. A billion. Anyone? 2 billion? No one's prepared to commit because I gave you a clue. What surprised me, I thought it would, because it's plateauing in China, I thought it'd probably even out at about 1.3. He said it'd be 600 million. Because population does that. And Russia is falling at the moment, Japan's falling, Italy's falling, a lot of European countries are falling. Africa isn't, but I think Africa's on the cusp. So my view, and I bet a lot of people disagree, I think population will probably peak at about 8.5 to 9 billion and then start to come down. It might come down faster than people realise, but that still doesn't take away from the enormous population pressure we've got. The third tipping point, which really worried me, actually not the malaria, the dengue and all of that, because I think we can manage that, is crop yields and the impact on food security and the fact that extremes of temperature are more important than averages. And the data from David Lobel and others that crop yields are much more sensitive. And we've seen this with the Russian drought just 2 years ago, which hit wheat production by 30% and big increases in prices. This year with effects on both the US and UK harvest. And you're getting this volatility in the Food and Agriculture Organization Food Price Index, which is really kicking in much quicker than people thought. And of course, food prices are highly sensitive to relatively small fluctuations in yield, and that has a lot of implications for poor people. And I think that actually is what will really tip the balance. And John Beddington, the chief government scientist, who is a food kind of agricultural economist, he's always said this is the thing that's going to hit us first. And if it's happening at 0.8 of a degree, it could be much worse than we think. So there are various ways, as Hugh has said, that the health effects of climate change may be mediated. Pretty obviously, the hotter you get, things like food poisoning will go up. That's fairly obvious. Certainly there's data to show that as temperature rises, malaria transmission goes up. These are some projections. I got this slide from Hugh actually in Zimbabwe. And certainly it's true that as temperature rises, the maturity of falciparum malaria it accelerates so that you're getting more transmission. There was a big punch-up that went on between Andrew Giteko, who's a malariologist in Kenya, and the Oxford group, and he said that transmission had moved quite a lot more in Kenya, and the others said it hadn't. But it turned out that Hay and Wright had got it wrong because they didn't factor altitude in. And there is evidence that there's increasing transmission. But with malaria, we've warmed over the last 100 years, but malaria rates are falling in many parts of the world. And so there are things that we can do about it with all of the control measures that we've got. So vector-borne diseases per se may not be the killers, if you like, of wiping out big populations. Although things like dengue fever are certainly going to increase, although most people don't die from dengue fever. The biggest threat, and I got this from Dermot Campbell-Lendrum at WHO, he said is the Donald Rumsfeld effect. It's the unknown unknown.